In this session, we're going to discuss the best ways to set up your charts. The first thing we need to do is get the data to create a chart. Now, there's a number of different data sources available. And to keep things simple, I'll show you how to get stock, futures, and Forex data with the end-of-day data provided by market analyst. And I'll also show you on top of that how to add real-time data to the mix. So let's get started. From the market analyst homepage, we can go to settings and go to configure data providers. Now, this is where we would select which third-party data provider would be giving us real-time data. Market analyst includes end-of-day data for the exchanges where you reside. So if you live in the United States, you'll have access to end-of-day data. If you're from Australia, you'll have access to Australian end-of-day. If you're from Canada, you can have access to Canadian end-of-day data. However, for real-time data, there's a list that we can choose from here. A few of these providers provide data only. For example, IQ Feed, eSignal. These ones are data providers. Some of the other data providers are broker-dealers. An example is GFT, Interactive Brokers, OpenECry. These are broker-dealers that provide you with real-time data if you have an account with them. So if you want to save a couple of dollars and you happen to have an account with one of these broker-dealers, you can have access to real-time data as it's fed into market analysts to create charts at no extra cost. So here's the list of real-time data providers. For an example, I have an account with OpenECry. I would select OpenECry. I put in my username and password, and then I can choose from what exchanges that I want to have access to with the real-time data here. You can move them back and forth depending on which one you want. And you click next, and that should be it. You've configured your real-time data provider. If you don't have access to a third-party data provider for real-time, that's okay, because we'll be focusing on end-of-day data in this course to make it really simple for those of you that don't have access to third-party data. So let's look over here at advanced data settings. Over here, if we open up exchanges, it'll show which exchanges have been enabled by market analyst. If there's an exchange that has got a lock on it, that means that you have not been authorized to access that exchange. And you would have to get in touch with market analysts to enable that exchange. So there, for the exchanges that have access to it, should say over here, exchange enabled with the check mark. So you should have access to a number of different exchanges from where you live over here for end-of-day data. Also, under the advanced data settings, if we go here and select an exchange, for an example, if we go to New York Stock Exchange, you can see the exchanges enabled. If we only have end-of-day data, we can see here end-of-day data provider market analyst. If we have intraday data, we can select it here. So I can choose OEC because I have a third-party data provider here. Then we go down here, and if you have end of day, what happens is every time you start market analyst, if it's on automatic download, it's going to download the most recent market data every time you start market analyst if you select automatic download. What I like to do is choose manual download, and I select download data on demand. And what that does is every time that you open up a chart of a specific symbol, then it will download the data. That's my personal preference. I don't want to download a bunch of data for a bunch of stocks I don't trade or I'm not interested in. So it really depends on your style of trading. I like to do it this way. There's a lag time of just a second usually when I crack the chart open. That's okay. I'm usually looking at that chart for a few minutes anyway, so that's fine. In addition, over here, if you have third-party real-time data. Intraday data options, you can choose how many days of data that you want for your minute chart and your tick chart, for an example. So we can choose a higher number here, and this really depends on the data provider that you have. A lot of them don't provide a ton of historical intraday data, so even though it says 30 days here, I might only be getting a few days because the data provider might not make that data available. The broker dealers are especially good at not giving you much data. Even though it's free, you have to look into how much historical data they're going to provide you with. So you think you might be saving some money using a third-party data provider that's a broker dealer. However, other companies like eSignal and IQ Feed, when you set these numbers to higher levels, you typically will get more data from those third-party data providers versus the broker dealers that claim to give you this free data. So something to keep in mind here. So I hit OK. Once I've configured my exchange, I have my end of day data provider, my intraday data provider. When I go to access a chart that uses end of day data, it's going to be data that's downloaded on demand. And I also have my intraday data options here set to maybe a higher level to give me enough bars to look at. So now I can hit OK, and we're good to go with our data. Now let's create an equities workbook. We're going to create a workspace with just US equities from the S&P 500. Now to do that, let's go over to settings again. Advanced data settings. We go over here to S&P 500. And my end of day data provider is market analyst, and my intraday data provider is OEC data. Okay, so I hit OK. Now let's set up our workspace. We're going to create one chart and lay it out the way that we like. We're going to save it as a template, open up a whole bunch of charts from the S&P 500, and apply that template to all the charts at the same time. This will save a tremendous amount of time setting up your charts. So to start, let's go to New Chart, Bar Chart, or we can hit F3. We go over here, S&P 500, and let's just start by opening a 3M chart. You can select the time frame over here. I'm selecting 1 day. So there's a daily 3M chart. The data is from market analyst. Now what we're going to do is we're going to open 2 more charts. I want to create a weekly, a daily, and then another one that's a 45-minute chart. I talk about the 45-minute chart in the Gartley trading method. So here's a daily chart of 3M. What we want to do is set up 3 different charts within the same page, and then we'll save it as a workspace. We'll save a workspace for each particular market that we're wanting to trade. So for an example, I'll save a workspace as US equities, another one as US futures, and then another one simply called Forex. So with the US equities workspace, we need to create a page for each equity within the S&P. So the first one is 3M. And we're going to create a template based on this number of charts that we'll put on one page. So each page can contain a number of charts. So here's the page tab up here. We have one chart on that page right now. So now what we want to do is add another chart. To do that, we right-click the chart, and it gives us a number of different menus here. And what we want to do is go over to the one that says New Item and go to New Chart. Okay, so click that. Once again, we have our security selection menu. We look at S&P 500. We go to the top. We're going to select 3M again. And this time we're going to open a weekly chart. And then all we have to do is double click with the left button on your mouse, and that will open the chart. Okay, so now we have a daily and we have a weekly. And now I want to open one more, and to do that, all I have to do is right click and select new chart, and then I'm going to choose a 45-minute time frame. Like I mentioned in the Gartley trading method, I talk about 45 minutes. And by default, Market Analyst does not have a 45-minute chart, but you can create any time frame that you want with the software, which is very cool. So to do that, I'll show you what you need to do. You got to go to Settings, General Settings, then go to Time Frames. And I've already got 45 minutes here, but you can do it yourself by adding whatever number that you want here, and whether it be minute or day or 45 hours, whatever you want, you can add this right here. You click the add button, and then it'll say 45-minute chart here. You can even add shortcuts for them. So once that's done, you're going to hit OK, and you're going to come back here, right click, go to New Chart, go to 3M at the top again, and select 45-minute. Once you have that, once again, you double click this, and that opens your third chart. Now remember, I said not every data provider gives you all the data that you need on intraday, and this is one of those examples here. Now, I don't care that much about the 45, so I'm going to move it like this. And here's the daily right here, and here's the weekly. I'm going to move the weekly and the 45 off to the side here. And I'm going to max out this daily, and this is going to be my focal point, the daily, when I'm looking for trade setups. Okay. Up here's a little slider bar, and you have all the years across the top here, and you can grab the end of this. And the gray area right here is showing you what's on your chart. So if you want more data, you just drag it over like that. If you want less data, you go like this. And if you want more or less white space, you can do this here. So this is the focal point for my technical analysis, is the daily. If I want to drill down and look at the 45, I can go over here for a shorter time frame. If I want to do longer term analysis, I can go over here and look at the weekly. And if I want to look at that weekly, I can just maximize the window there and have a better look at it. So this is how we're going to set up our charts. With the daily on the right hand side here, we'll make them, these little ones, a little bit bigger, like that. And also the slider bar on the weekly, I don't care, that can be small, likewise on the 45, but my slider bar over here on the daily, I might want that a little bit bigger. Alrighty, now besides this, let's add volume. As we'll get into it, we'll be looking at doing the TRG, or trend reversal Gartley patterns, and to do that properly, based on the original rules by H.M. Gartley, we'll have to apply volume to the charts. So to do that, we're going to have to go over here to Tools, and there's a number of different tools you can choose from. What we want to look for is volume. So we click volume, we come over here and just add simple volume. Now we've got the little hand down here. You just drop the volume wherever you want it on the chart, above the price action or below, usually below. So we just click here on the chart and we have volume. We can reduce the size of that window down to a smaller amount based on the fact that I am not going to look at volume that much. Only when I want to look for trend reversal Gartleys will I be looking at volume. While we're at it, let's put volume on the weekly as well. So go to Tools, Volume, over here, drop it on the chart, and we got volume on that one as well. So I'll just reduce it down, and when we want to expand the window here, we can look at volume and do some longer term analysis. So now we got our charts set up with volume. We have a 45, we've got a weekly, and we got a daily. Now what we need to do is save this as a template. And to do that, we go over here to File and go over here to Save Page as Template. Okay, and so you should have a window pop open here, and I'm saving this template as GTC. You can call it anything that you want. I call it GTC, not for Good Till Cancel, but for the geometric trading course. So save it there, and then it's going to be available for you to use on your workbook. Now that we've saved the template, we can now close this workbook. So let's do that now. Close workbook. It's a new one, but we're not ready to save any workbooks yet. We're going to create a special one next. So when it asks you, do you want to save this? No. Okay. You've already saved the template. That's what we did with that little exercise there. That's really what counts, is the template. So now what we're going to do is you can either hit F3 or you can go to New, Chart, Bar Chart. Over here, select Daily. Make sure you're on the S&P 500. Go to the top, select 3M. Click it once, scroll down to the bottom, and hold down your Shift key. Left click the last symbol, Priceline.com, and you should highlight all the symbols in the process. Now, right click anywhere on the highlighted symbols, and you'll have this menu here. I want you to go to Open All Selected Codes. Left click that, and this is what should happen. Notice it says Loading Workbook. It's opening all 500 pages. Okay, so there you have the first chart is 3M, and it goes, you got every single page, 500 pages within this workbook are open now. You notice that these are red and blue bars, and that's one of the properties that you can set for the bars in the software. Not my favorite. I just like the plain old black and white. And you can go in and change the color and the type of bars that you have. But we don't have to worry about that right now because we've already saved a template, remember? Because if we look at any one of these, by default, the software will open it up and it'll have these different color bars. It doesn't have the volume. It doesn't have the 3 different time frames on each one of the pages. So how do we apply all that information to 500 different pages? It sounds like a lot of work. Well, actually, check this out. Go over here, apply template to workbook. Press that, and you should see the template that you saved already. I called mine GTC. So I'm going to click GTC now and check it out. Do I want to save this? No. There we go. Applying template, 1 of 499. That's funny. There's one stock missing. I guess it's called the S&P 499. I have to look into that. Okay, there you go. Now that was pretty easy, wasn't it? You got your weekly, 45 over here, the daily, and you have all the tabs across the top. You can just click any one of these tabs, and it'll crack open that chart for you. Now that we have all our pages opened, we're ready to save this as a workbook. To do that, go to File, Save Workbook As, and in this case, what you can do is save it as S&P 500. Oops. Save it as S&P 500. Okay, so now that's saved, and we can close that. Close workbook. And what we can do is we can open that workbook whenever we're at the home page and we see S&P 500. We can click that, and it will open up our workbook. Remember, it is a big workbook, so it's going to take a minute. So there it says Loading Workbook. And there you go. So that's how you save the S&P 500 in a workbook for easy access. Now let's see how we would create a workbook for futures.